The small-town diner had always been a safe haven, a place where farmers, workers, and travelers passed through like clockwork. Its neon sign flickered faintly above the door, buzzing against the soft hum of the evening crickets outside. Inside, the red leather booths and polished checkered floors held the smell of buttered toast, coffee, and fried bacon. The place was cozy, but tonight, for one girl, the warmth of the diner would feel a lot colder. Emily sat near the corner by the window, her hands neatly folded over her lap. She had always liked that spot. It allowed her to watch the world outside, people going about their day, while also giving her some quiet space where she didn't feel too exposed. Her wheelchair stood as a silent reminder of what she had endured 2 years earlier in a car accident that had changed her life forever. She was only 17, but her spirit had aged far beyond that, seasoned by the endless whispers, pitying glances, and sometimes, outright cruelty from mothers her age. She had gotten used to solitude. With the well-worn book in her bag and her earbuds tucked away, Emily had developed a way of surviving by blending into the background. But that night, the quietness she usually enjoyed was broken. The diner's door jingled open with a sharp ring of the bell. In walked 3 teenage boys, loud and confident, strutting as though they owned the place. Their sneakers squeaked on the floor, and their voices carried across the small space, drawing glances from the regulars. The leader of the group, Tyler, was tall with an athletic build, the kind of boy who lived for attention. Behind him trailed Jake and Ryan, always laughing at his jokes, always eager to follow his lead. At first, Emily thought nothing of it. Teenagers came and went all the time. She lowered her eyes to her phone, scrolling aimlessly through a music playlist, hoping to look invisible. But invisibility was a fragile illusion, especially when the wrong eyes decided to notice you. Tyler's gaze swept the room, landing squarely on her. A slow smirk spread across his face. He nudged Jake with his elbow, muttering something that made the others snicker. Emily felt the shift instantly, her chest tightening, her fingers curling around her phone as if it could shield her. She knew that look. She had seen it in school, in parks, even on the streets. It was the look of someone who had found a target. "Hey, look who's here," Tyler said loudly, enough for half the diner to hear. His voice carried a mock sweetness, dripping with cruel amusement. "Princess Wheels." The words cut sharper than knives. A couple of older customers glanced over but quickly looked away, uncomfortable, unwilling to interfere. Emily tried to focus on the tabletop, tracing the patterns in the wood grain with her eyes, pretending she didn't hear. Maybe if she stayed quiet, they would lose interest. But Tyler wasn't the kind to back off. He sauntered over to her booth, Jake and Ryan trailing behind him like shadows. The smell of cologne and cheap energy drinks surrounded them. "So, what's it like?" Tyler asked, leaning against the table, his face inches from hers. "Do you, like, race people down the street?" "Better fast." His words were meant to sting, to reduce her dignity to nothing but a cruel punchline. Emily clenched her jaw, willing herself not to react. Her silence, however, only fueled them more. Jake chuckled and added, "Careful, Ty. She might run you over." "Oh, she can't." The laughter erupted, harsh and cutting, filling the diner. A hot flush of humiliation crept up Emily's neck. Her hands trembled, but she kept them pressed firmly on her lap. She wouldn't cry, not here, not in front of them. Tyler's smirk twisted into something darker. Without warning, he leaned down and gave her cheek a sharp slap, and not hard enough to leave a bruise, but enough to send a shock of pain through her and make her head whip to the side. The sound cracked through the diner like a whip. Emily's breath caught in her throat. Her heart pounded wildly as she looked around, desperate for help. The waitress behind the counter froze, her hand hovering over the coffee pot. A couple near the door whispered nervously, but no one moved. No one spoke up. The silence of bystanders screamed louder than the boys' laughter. Tears stung at the corners of Emily's eyes, but she blinked them back furiously. She hated giving them satisfaction. She hated feeling powerless. Yet at that moment, every ounce of her strength seemed locked away, trapped inside a body that wouldn't cooperate. Tyler laughed, flicking his fingers as though brushing away dust. "What's the matter? Didn't like that? Come on, we're just having fun." "Yeah," Jake chimed in, grinning. "Lighten up. It's a joke." The 3 boys sauntered off toward a booth on the other side of the diner, high-fiving each other, their cruel victory etched into their smug faces. Emily sat frozen in place, her hands trembling in her lap. The sting of the slap remained, but the deeper wound was invisibly the reminder that to some people, she was less than human. The waitress approached cautiously, her voice soft. "Sweetheart, are you okay? Do you want me to call someone?" Emily forced a small smile, shaking her head. "I'm fine," she whispered, though her voice cracked. She wasn't fine, but she couldn't bring herself to cause more of a scene. For the next hour, Emily sat in silence. She picked at her food, though her appetite was gone, each tick of the clock on the diner wall amplifying the ache in her chest. The boys laughed loudly at their booth, mocking the waitress, tossing wadded-up napkins at each other. To everyone else, it was just another night. To Emily, it was another reminder of her place in a world that too often refused to see her strength. But the night wasn't over. The bell above the door jingled again, this time followed by the heavy, steady sound of boots hitting the floor. The air shifted instantly. Heads turned. A group of bikers, 7 of them, clad in leather jackets and worn jeans, stepped inside. Their presence filled the diner with an unspoken authority, the kind that made the rowdy laughter from the boys at the booth falter just slightly. Emily's eyes flicked toward them, her breath catching. She didn't know why, but something deep inside told her that things were about to change, and she was right. The bell over the diner door clanged as the heavy-set group walked in, and suddenly the air felt charged. 7 bikers in worn leather vests and denim jackets filled the doorway, their boots echoing against the tiled floor as they stepped inside. The low murmur of conversation in the diner faded almost instantly. Even the jukebox in the corner seemed quieter, as though the entire place was holding its breath. At the front of the group was a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, with a thick gray beard and sharp eyes that scanned the room with a calm authority. His name was Jack Grizzly Turner, president of the local motorcycle club known as the Iron Guardians. He wasn't the kind of man people crossed lightly. Behind him were 6 other men who carried themselves with the kind of weight that came from hard roads, tougher battles, and a loyalty that could not be shaken. The waitress froze mid-step, her hand clutching a tray. For a moment, Emily forgot about her pain and fear, drawn to the sight of these men who seemed to radiate strength. The bullies, on the other hand, shifted uneasily in their booth, their loud bravado evaporating like mist under the morning sun. Tyler tried to act casual, leaning back in his seat, but his smirk was tighter now, his confidence beginning to crack. The bikers took seats at a long booth, their jackets creaking as they settled in. They ordered coffee, burgers, and pie in voices that trembled low and steady. But as Jack scanned the room, his eyes lingered on Emily. He noticed the slight redness on her cheek, the trembling in her hands, and the forced stillness in her posture. He'd been around long enough to recognize fear and injustice. He leaned slightly toward the waitress as she poured him coffee. "What happened here?" His voice was calm, but beneath it was steel. The waitress hesitated, biting her lip, glancing toward the booth where Tyler and his friend sat. She didn't want trouble, but the truth hung heavy in her chest. Before she could answer, Emily spoke softly, almost against her will. "It's fine," she said. "Nothing happened." But Jack's eyes narrowed. He wasn't fooled. Years of leading his brothers had taught him to see past the surface. He gave her a slow nod, his way of saying "I hear you, even if you can't say it out loud." The bikers began eating, but every so often, one of them glanced toward Emily, their expressions tight with restrained anger. They had seen her face. They knew. Tyler, still clinging to the remnants of his arrogance, decided to test the waters. He raised his voice, just enough for the bikers to hear. "Careful, boys," he sneered, nodding toward Emily's table. "Watch out, or she might run over your toes. Dangerous, you know." Jake and Ryan snickered nervously, though their laughter lacked the boldness from earlier. Emily felt her stomach twist. She wanted to disappear. But what happened next made her heart pound in disbelief. One of the bikers, a towering man with tattoos running down both arms, slammed his coffee mug onto the table with a sound like thunder. The diner jumped. His eyes blazed as he stood slowly, every inch of him radiating fury. "You think you're funny, kid?" he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The room went still. Tyler's smirk faltered. I was just joking," he stammered, his bravado shrinking. Jack raised a hand, calming his brother before he did something reckless. He stood up himself, his presence commanding. He walked slowly toward Emily's table, each step deliberate, his boots echoing in the tense silence. He crouched down so his eyes were level with hers, his expression softening. "You okay, sweetheart?" he asked gently, his voice so different from the sharp edge he'd used moments earlier. Emily swallowed hard. She didn't trust her voice, so she just nodded. But Jack had seen the truth long before she answered. He turned his head toward the boys' booth, his eyes hardening into steel. "Stand up," he ordered. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried an authority that left no room for argument. Tyler blinked. "What? Why?" "Because I said so." The boys shifted uncomfortably. Jake muttered, "Man, let's just go." But Jack wasn't finished. "You thought it was funny to hurt someone who can't fight back, to humiliate her in front of everyone? That's what cowards do." His voice cut through the air like a blade. The other bikers stood now, surrounding the booth like a wall of leather and muscle. The boys looked trapped, their earlier arrogance shriveling under the weight of true strength. "Apologize," Jack demanded. Tyler's face burned red. His pride screamed at him to resist, but the look in Jack's eyes left no room for defiance. He mumbled something under his breath. "Louder," one of the bikers barked. Tyler's voice cracked as he said, "I'm sorry." Jack turned back to Emily. "You hear that, sweetheart?" Emily nodded faintly, though her voice whispered, "It doesn't change anything." Jack's expression softened again. He placed a gentle hand on her table. "You're right, but it means they know this isn't forgotten." He turned back to Tyler. "Now get out, and if I ever hear you lay a hand on anyone like that again, you'll answer to me and my brothers. Understood?" The boys scrambled out of their booth, their sneakers squeaking against the tile as they bolted out the door. The bell above it jingled wildly as they disappeared into the night. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily exhaled deeply. The weight on her chest lifted slightly, though the sting on her cheek still throbbed. Jack returned to his seat, but not before giving her a reassuring nod. The other bikers followed his lead, their faces still etched with anger but softened by pride. They weren't heroes in capes. They weren't saints, but they had seen injustice, and they had acted. The diner slowly returned to life, conversations picking up again, though now tinged with whispers about what had just happened. The waitress, her eyes glistening, brought Emily a slice of pie on the house. "You're stronger than you know," she whispered. Emily smiled faintly. For the first time that night, she wasn't used to kindness, especially from strangers who looked as rough and intimidating as the bikers did. But sometimes, kindness wore unexpected faces. As the bikers finished their meal, Jack leaned over one last time. "Don't let people like that make you think you're less than you are. You've got more strength in you than they'll ever have." Emily felt tears rise again, but this time they weren't from pain. They were from something warmer, hope. When the bikers finally left, the rumble of their motorcycles echoed through the night like thunder rolling across the hills. Emily sat in her booth, a small smile tugging at her lips. She still carried scars, both seen and unseen, but now she also carried the memory of that night when men who owed her nothing stood up for her dignity. And in that memory, she found a piece of strength she hadn't known was still there.